Hello, everybody. Pastor Rick here, Broadman Baptist Church, and today is December 2nd, 2022, and this is the Broadman Word. I am going to talk to you today about love against falsehood. It's from 1 Timothy, Paul's letter to Timothy while Timothy's in Ephesus, and he was a very young man and had been entrusted with a very large church, possibly the largest church in the world at that time anyway. So what a massive responsibility. And Paul certainly had a lot of love and trust in Timothy and had sincere concerns about what Timothy might have been going through. And so he writes a very insightful and loving letter to Timothy. Today we can apply these principles. We can take heart that the problems that we're having today aren't all that different than what Timothy was facing, and that's simply because of human nature. But we can listen to the words of Paul and take encouragement in what he says from his pastoral view, his advice to the young Timothy. So it is from 1 Timothy chapter 1. We'll start in verse 3. It says, "As I urged you when I went to Macedonia, stay there in Ephesus, so that you may command certain people not to teach false doctrines any longer, or to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies. Such things promote controversial speculations rather than advancing God's work, which is by faith. The goal of this command is love, which comes from a pure heart and a good conscience and sincere faith. Some have departed from these and have turned to meaningless talk. They want to be teachers of the law, but they do not know what they are talking about or what they so confidently affirm." So we can see here that Paul is definitely concerned about the quality or the culture of folks that Timothy is surrounded by and what exists and is prevalent in Ephesus. And he's saying to Timothy to command certain people not to teach these doctrines any longer. And he says the goal of this command is love. So today we have, the proliferation of false doctrines and false prophets, and even those calling themselves churches and seemingly trying to advance the gospel, but really having replaced core scriptural teaching with their own theories and their own ideologies and things that are designed to make the gospel more palatable, not more true in the life of somebody, things that are designed to be culturally compliant and consistent with the views of the popular masses of the day, not necessarily the presentation of the gospel as it is, or even a view of the gospel in what it says as love from God. That makes these teachers and these theories false. It makes the people false. And so apparently in Ephesus, Timothy is surrounded by folks who want to have what Paul refers to as meaningless talk, meaning they are talking to hear themselves and to advance things that will bring glory or riches to themselves, not necessarily, or not at all going to advance the gospel, which Paul says is by faith. And he goes on later to say a good conscience and faith. So then it's for us to take this message to Timothy and try to make some sort of application to it for today. Today, we need to be people of good conscience and faith. We need to have a vision that goes beyond what is presented to us here and now in this world and the circumstances and the situations presented to us. We shouldn't view as from a worldly perspective. We shouldn't view as it comes to us. We should view it as the spiritual beings that we are intended to be, and evaluate everything in terms of advancing the gospel. Now, Paul certainly didn't shy away from preaching the gospel, and he's telling Timothy not to as well. But the people have to be receptive. There has to be a receptive mind and heart. Well, first mind to hear the gospel, and then a heart to accept it. Or it's just a guy talking. Paul could put together some of the most eloquent words in sermons, but without receptive minds and hearts, then it was pointless. And so what had to happen first was Timothy had to interfere with or stop. In fact, Paul tells him to command the end to the false teaching and false doctrines, people following false doctrines. And we need to take that and apply it to today. The first thing that needs to happen before we put together words of the gospel, and before we, with our good conscience and faith, present gospel, what we need to do is put an end to or interfere with the false doctrine, the teaching of false doctrine, the false words. And so that therein lies our first task. And in so doing, we will also be presenting the gospel as the light of Jesus Christ comes through us. But first, we have to have laser-focused faith, and we have to take our hope not from anything in this world, but from our hope in the Lord, our hope in heaven, and the protection and provisions of God, and belief that God will deliver us from whatever we might need to be delivered from, that he would gift us with whatever tools, knowledge, and wisdom and words that we need. And so we must first believe in what we do not see, but what we yet know to exist. After that, we can then speak words of truth. We can live lives of truth and not engage in worldliness or false doctrines or entertain it at all. In so doing, we begin to take the edge off of the world's doctrines. When people can see us living separately, holy, separate, set apart, when they see us living holy, God-honoring lives and doing just fine and relying on God for our provision and our protection and not anything of the world, when they see us at peace, even in serious circumstances that just happen because it is a sin-sick, fallen world, but when they see us handle it with grace and peace because of the love we know of God, the protection that we know we have, the promises that we know that we have, and then ultimately our hope in heaven, when they see that, then the door opens to hearing the gospel that made that possible. But the interdiction comes first, the stop sign, if you will, for the false doctrine has to be us individually. The church needs to do it, but the church is the individual people making a congregation. So it is very much going to have to start with you. It's going to have to be an individual decision to make sure that your life is beyond reproach, that there is nothing that can, in what you say or do, that could impugn the gospel. Doesn't mean you're not going to sin. You will. We all do. But what it does mean is that you're not going to live a life of continued engaging in the same sins or the things of the world or the words of the world, that you will have a repentant heart and live as godly and God-honoring as you can. You will handle things of the world from a godly perspective. Your views and opinions, the way you speak, talk, act, vote, even how you dress, is going to reflect a God-honoring, God-willed life. and it will be glaringly clear to all who see you that you are in fact set apart for something else, living holy. And that's when we can begin to deliver the gospel, because then we have a mind and some ears open to hear about how we do this. And then later on, we can then hopefully bring them to a point where God will place his call on their heart. And then we will have both a willing mind and a willing heart, and the gospel can take root in them. So don't be overwhelmed by the vastness of what you see around you, the evil, the destruction, the divisiveness, the violence, the anger. That's not for us to concern ourselves with. What we need to do is attack what makes all these other things happen. The false doctrine, departure from the truth, the rejection and rebellion against God's will. And we can do that one by one, but you need to make the decision to do it, and then you need to have the will, God's will, to carry it out. So listen, I love you. I hope you have a marvelous day in the Lord. I'll talk to you next time.